Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, the channel where we are making a computer role-playing game using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, as in the last one, I would like to demonstrate a spell which I have recently added to the game. In this case, the spell is the one that used to be called Fairy Gold, but I changed it to Fairy's Fortune, which I don't think is as good a name, but which I felt like I needed to do that because I've already established that the currency that we're using in the fiction of the game is not gold, it's cowrie shells. So fairy's gold or fairy gold wouldn't sort of make as much sense. And it's possible, of course, that they use gold and cowrie shells, but I thought, okay, well, I won't call it fairy gold, I'll call it Fairy's Fortune. I don't think that's as good a name. I think fairy gold is more evocative, but it fits the setting better. I've also changed the icon. The previous icon was sort of chunky bits of gold, basically, which didn't make sense. So I've found this icon instead, which is meant to be a sort of pile of spices. That was what the description called it. But it also resembles a kind of pile of, to me anyway, resembles a kind of pile of gleaming treasure. So I think most people looking at it will sort of instinctively associate the picture with treasure, but then also what the picture's meant to be makes sense in terms of the fiction of the game, which is that cowrie shells are the currency and spices are a sort of major subject of trade, I suppose, as was the case in history. Now, I have made a permanent change to the game, which is that elves start with the ability to cast this spell. I thought if it was called Fairy's Fortune, it would be a bit weird if you had an elf character and they couldn't cast it. Feels like they sort of should be able to. So to compensate for that, I've reduced the total of their attributes. If we add this up, we get 9 plus 1 is 10, plus another 10 is 20, plus 11 is 31, and then that's 25, so 31 and 25. Hang on. Oh, no, I see. I counted the 1 twice. That adds up to 55. Right. Sorry about that. It adds up to 55, which is what it should be, whereas everyone else's attributes other than size add up to 60. So I don't know whether that's appropriately balanced. I don't know whether 5 attribute points is worth having a spell or not, but you've got to sort of pick something and then just test it and see if it works. So let's look at what the spell does anyway. So here we are at the start of the underworld, and I've just realised I've said you may leave the dungeon, and that should be leave the underworld. But anyway, I'll fix that after I record this. Let's see if we can find a... Okay, so we see a settlement. The inhabitants have the form of people, male on one side, female on the other, from the waist up, and they're fish from the waist down. Okay, so there's a new option in this list, which is that we can approach them, we can try and scare them, try and sneak through, we can go back the way we came, but there's a new option, which is we can cast Fairy's Fortune, and then offer them this supposed treasure. So the previous spell, when we tried to cast it, we had to roll against will and the average of will and intelligence, or we had to roll and add the average of will and intelligence. This one, I've decided, just works. And the reason I've decided that it just works is that I have decided that I don't necessarily need a consistent mechanism for spells. I don't need them all to work exactly the same way. I know a lot of people disagree, and I know the sort of trend in particularly pen and paper role-playing games is towards unified mechanics. But I mean, it seems to me that excuse me, it seems to me that magic sort of can be illogical and contradictory. It doesn't have to be like science. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to sort of make the same sense that things in the real world make. So, maybe one spell you have to roll and it doesn't always work, whereas this spell does always work. as long as there's a cost. For game purposes, of course, you can't have a spell that just has no downside. We'll get to the downside in a second, but at the moment we're looking at the upside, which is that the monsters present us with a scroll giving them instructions to cast another spell, the Terrible Word, and they offer to trade as they think, and we exchange our supposed wealth for a great big haul of spices. And if we look at the character sheet, we can see that that's been reflected there. So there are three possibilities. What we got here is the best of the three. It's basically it's a random choice between the three best options that you can get when you're negotiating with or when you approach a settlement without casting a spell, which is to say they let you pass through their territory and give you a scroll. They offer to trade with you, or they offer to trade with you and give you a scroll. And we've gotten the best one of those three. So that's the upside of being able to cast this spell. The downside is that in the fiction of the game, they'll notice that they've been had. I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of sort of fairy gold in folklore, but the idea is that it looks like this great treasure, but then it sort of fades away very quickly, and it turns out it was just leaves or something worthless. And so the fiction of the game is that you do this on them, and they're very pleased, but then they realise that they've been had, and when you come back, they randomly one of two things will happen. They will either tell you that you have to go back the way you came, or you have to fight them, which is what they've done here, or they might just attack you on sight. So you get one really good haul, or one good haul or really good haul, depending on the exact results, from a settlement, but the cost is that you sort of burn that settlement forever, and then they're hostile to you forever. So will that turn out to be balanced? Well, again, I'll just have to make a guess, put it out there, test it, change it based on the testing. Perhaps I'll lower the amount of spices that you get, for example, if it turns out that that's too good. So that's the main use of the spell. There's another use which I'm not going to try and play until I get an example of it, because it doesn't happen all that often, and that is if you approach a settlement and they tell you have to pay a toll, then you can pay the toll by casting Fairy's Fortune. And in that case, it only has a 1 in 6 chance that they'll notice. Normally, you'll get away with it. In the fiction of the game, perhaps they put your supposed payment in a sort of general storehouse, and so it's not. They don't notice, who's tricked them, or they don't notice that they've been tricked at all, perhaps. But there's a chance that they will, but it's a lot smaller. But as I say, I won't try and create that because it would take a long time to get that result. So that's what it looks like in play. Let's have a look at the code. So we'll get into Twine. Obviously, as you can see, I've zoomed in already. So the first thing we needed to do, was add the requirement that elves have lower attributes and get the spell. And this is what I've done here. If R equals 2, in other words, if R is equal to 2, R is the code for your race, and 2 happens to be the one for elves. Then we do a few things. We set BA equal to BA minus 5, in other words, take 5 from the value of BA. We set SL2 equal to 1, and we set SL0 equal to 1. Now, the explanation of what that is. BA stands for balance, and the way it works is that you have a certain total that you should have for your attributes other than size. Normally it's 60. It goes down based on the attributes that you have. So if you have an attribute, if your strength is 15, it'll take 15 away from the total. And of course, it's aiming to get exactly 0. and then if it's positive or negative, it needs to adjust. It needs to adjust it until it gets to 0. So we set BA to be BA minus 5. So you'll have 5 fewer attribute points in total than, again, not counting size, than other characters. SL is an array which stands for spells learnt. SL0 is just the total number of spells that you know, which is 0 for most characters, but will be 1 for elves from now on. And SL2 is a slot that determines whether you've learnt spell number 2. So SL1, SL2, SL3, SL4, SL5, and SL6 are all the same. They're 0 to start with, or they're set to 1 if you happen to learn the relevant spell. And SL2 is Fairy's Fortune. So that's fairly straightforward. The other thing we need to do is have an option when you are approaching a settlement and choosing what your strategy is going to be. So you can approach them, you can try to scare them away, you can try to sneak through, you can go back the way you came, but now we have this new option, which of course only comes up if the player has the relevant spell, and that option is a link with the text cast Fairy's Fortune and the destination Fortune. So what happens in Fortune? Well, it's just fairly straightforward again. We set MD to be, we set the slot of MD that is relevant to our current location. So CX and CY are your current X and Y locations. MD is an array that gives the details. It stands for map details. And we set MD square bracket $CX unsquare bracket $CY unsquare bracket equal to 8. And let's go through what that means just briefly. Basically, MS is the broad category of what is at CXCY. So, hang on, I keep scrolling past. There we go. Okay, so we have this list. This is a different array, but we have this list where 0 is nothing, 1 is a settlement, 2 is a special location, 3 is an undiscovered clue, 4 is a clue that's been discovered, 5 is a dead traveller, which is a new encounter that I haven't shown you yet. And then MS CXCY will tell you which one of those it is, if that makes sense. So if MS 23 is set to 2, and you are at 2-3, in other words, CX is 2 and CY is 3, then that means you're at a special location. But you need to know more details than that, because you need to know if it's a special location, you need to know which special location, and if you're at a settlement, you need to know what the attitude of the settlement is. And MD gives the details for that. So there's quite a lot of different policies that the settlement can have. But 8 means that you cast Fairy's Fortune last time you visited, and when you come back, there's a 50% chance that they will change to Attitude 1, which means they'll attack you on sight, or Attitude 4, which is they'll tell you to go back the way you came, and if you refuse, they will fight you. So we set that up for when the player comes back, or if the player comes back. And then we choose randomly what the result is. And as I said, there's 3. You get a gift and they let you pass through their territory. They offer to trade with you. Well, it's of course not going to be trade, unbeknownst to them. or they give you a gift and offer to trade with you. And so if it's one with a gift, we include the page gift, which is just choose a random spell, basically. And then if it was in this particular option, you press continue. If it's offer to trade, we go straight to this other page, Fortune 2. And if it's gift and trade, well, they give you the gift, and then we go to Fortune 2. So if we go to Explore, well, we know Explore is just the general page that you're navigating through the underworld. But Fortune 2, we just it's basically a four next loop, which goes to SN length -1. SN is spice names. We've seen this format before, where we have less than for Z equals 1, semicolon. Sorry, for $Z equals 1, semicolon. $Z is less than or equal to $SN dot length -1, semicolon, $Z plus plus. Now, what that SN length -1 means is the number of elements in the array SN. If SN wasn't an array, this would generate an error, because it wouldn't make sense to the computer. But so it's the number of elements in the SN array that have been specified, or rather the largest element that's been specified. And you have to do -1. You'd sort of think it would be, well, we just go to SN length, wouldn't we? No. SN.length -1 is the number that we need. And the reason for that, I think, is because computers tend to count from 0. Computer programming languages tend to treat the 0th element as the first element, which I find slightly, I mean, there's probably a good reason for it, but I find it slightly counterintuitive, but there it is. So we have to do under or equal to $SN.length -1. But what that just means is go through every spice, and for every spice, generate a random number, which is random 1 to 6 plus random 1 to 6. So in other words, it's the equivalent of rolling 2 6-sided dice, and then add that number to $SA square bracket $Z unsquare bracket. In other words, SA is spice amount. It's the just how many measures of that particular spice you have. You always start with 0 of everything, but you may have picked up some because you may have traded with other settlements. But either way, set $SA square bracket $Z unsquare bracket plus equals $Y. Plus equals just means set it equal to its current value plus, in this case, Y. And then we print a little bit of text that tells us what's happening. So it'll print something like 7 measures of nutmeg, for example, and then a line break. And once we've got that good news, we have a link. So that's square bracket, continue, vertical line, explore, unsquare bracket, which just means it'll print the text continue as a link, and if we click on the link, it'll take us to explore, which is the main page where we're navigating around the underworld. The other, I will show you briefly the other bit, the other possible use of it, which is in Toll, which is an obscure one, where they tell you that you have to pay a randomly chosen amount of carry shells. Again, it's 2 dice worth for passage to their territory. If you have the relevant spell, it gives you an extra option, which is cast Fairy's Fortune. Otherwise, you have to either pay or just go back or fight them. But if you choose to pay, pay by casting the spell. Sorry, I said it was 1 in 6. It's actually 1 in 3. There's a 1 in 3 chance that it will set MD CXCY to 8. In other words, it'll set it to that a specific setting where they've noticed that you've tried to rip them off, and they're either going to attack you or at least tell you to go back the way you came, and then you continue on to explore. So it's all fairly straightforward. There's no new types of programming in that. It's just an application of things that we've already explored in previous videos. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.